And well, now it's being recorded. And it will be available on our website in about a week. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. If you'd like to ask any questions, please drop them in there. We'll do our best to get to all of those at the end of the webinar. And once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting all of the work we do in law enforcement. And I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and Jillian to get us started.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate everybody's time. We've put this webinar together today to really focus on some of the main areas of recruiting that could be ailing your agency. Make sure that this is presenting correctly. Okay. Um, and one of the biggest ones was the day zero. I mean, this comes down to what is happening operationally that is making sure that we are capturing and we are also retaining the recruits through the entire application process. So with this webinar, we're going to go through statistics, we're going to go through a lot of reports, but then give you some real tangible everyday solutions that can help your agency graduate more cadets and then obviously have more sworn officers. So with that, I'll kind of introduce myself. So again, my name is Ryan Lewis. I'm the CEO and founder of Respond Capture. Uh, I have worked within the marketing and recruiting business for about 25 years now, and we've grown and built this agency that we have to be one of the most efficient and fastest results for our clients. So that's a bit of my background. Jillian, I'll let you speak to yours.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jillian Snyder. Currently, I'm the Director of External Affairs here at Respond Capture. Additionally, I am a retired New York City police officer, having retired in 2020. I'm also a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I'm a resident senior fellow at the R Street Institute in Washington, D.C. And I look forward to sharing all of what Respond Capture and 30 by 30 can do together ultimately.
Great. All right. So the first thing I want to dig in is just speak about values a little bit, how this aligns. So 30 by 30 in particular, one of the values is strengthening recruitment and hiring practices so more women can successfully enter policing. Huge goal and definitely something that we are doing everything we can to support. And then also to provide tools and resources to effectively recruit and hire. Where we align is very similar. So we have a mission to fill first responder agencies with the best candidates. That is our mission to make this happen. Um, it's probably helpful. There you go. Now you can focus on the slides a little bit. Um, and with that, we also have a mission to provide tools and services that reduce costs, save time, and increase recruiting effectiveness. It is our goal and it's our mission to make sure that what we do has a direct effect by also reducing costs. This is just kind of an example of 20 years of work. We work with a lot of different agencies and we do a lot of design, but this is just kind of the recruiting piece to this. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is keeping applicants through the process. So, a little bit on results. Applicant recruiting, we typically, and this is an average over the last 10 years, but we've increased total applications of about 152% for agencies. And then impressions, which are important, just how many eyeballs are seeing your advertising, your agency's advertising, about 100 or 583% increase. And that seems like a huge number, but a lot of agencies we work with are not doing so well with the awareness and marketing piece to this. But then when it comes to applicant offers, we're about 54% reduction in recruiting costs. So that means less costs when it comes to managing that applicant all the way through the system. That means more efficiencies. That means a lot of automations. And then what we are seeing is actually a 2.4 times increase in Academy invites. Now, I'm going to be using a lot of different terms here, and I do want to make sure that we are using the right terms because every agency does use a little bit of different term. When we refer to things as an applicant, then that is somebody that has applied to be in your agency and is through the process of testing, through the process of psych evaluation, polygraph, if you're in that, if your agency does that, or background investigation. It is basically everything that is pre going to an academy or getting a job offer to work within the academy or within the agency. Anything that is beyond that is we'll refer to as a hire or an applicant invite or something along those lines. But we're going to try to keep the lexicon as close as we possibly can. But applications, sometimes it's candidates, but just know that there's a delineation between when they've gone through all the background, when they've, and then when they go to the academy, or get that job offer. So our agenda today is what is the problem? Why does the problem occur? What are the recruiting problems? What is the solution and what are the outcomes? And we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end if there are any questions. So first of all, I'm going to try to go through these slides fairly quickly because I think we all know a lot of these problems. But law enforcement and emergency services staff shortages in 2025. Local police nationwide were about 9%. And I did want to put dispatchers here because we do try to do recruiting for an entire agency, and dispatching has actually a deficit of about 25% nationwide. There's a lot of mandatory overtime with that. There's a lot of stress and burnout. And so we do want to at least call to attention that it's a whole agency problem, not just sworn officer. A couple examples of that. San Francisco and Phoenix face shortage of exceeding 400 officers. Chicago is short about 1,300 officers, and Indianapolis nearly 300 fewer officers than it did in 2019. These are big stats. This is a huge deficit in how an agency is able to perform their job and provide service for the community. So. And we also want to make sure that we pay attention that this is just what they're reporting. This could be also the fact that maybe they decide that they need fewer officers, but that short staffs the entire agency. So this is just a space and time saying that Chicago in particular, they are short 1,300 officers. That means there is 1,300 openings that they need. And same with Indianapolis and San Francisco and Phoenix. Now, what does that mean as far as raw numbers? 9% law enforcement officer deficit is about 72,000 vacant law enforcement officer positions. That is a large amount of people needing, or a large amount of agencies needing new applicants. And then on the dispatch side, it's about 82,136 vacant positions. That's a large number. Um, what that also does is, and you're going to see this slide again just because it's really important to focus on, but the lack of officers also creates a budget problem. The budget problem being overtime spending. So San Diego in 2024 spent 56 million in just overtime spending. Now, I understand sometimes you want overtime, sometimes you want to work those extra hours, but in many cases, a lot of these municipalities and counties and states, there are mandatory overtime being put in place. New York City saw 955 million in extra spending on overtime, and that's something that's fairly unsustainable when you think about the budgets it's pulling from. These budgets have to balance, and a lot of times it's really hard to do when you have variable expenses like overtime. So why is the problem happening? So this is a little look at demographics and a few other things, but I think it's an important thing to focus on. So one is retirements. There are a lot of retirements, or a silver tsunami, if you will, that is starting to infect not just law enforcement, but all businesses. And what we're seeing is that from 2019 to 2025, there was an increase of about 82.5% being eligible for retirement. And that's a big problem. That's causing a crisis not just in the lack of law enforcement that is working within agencies, but it's also a knowledge gap, an experience level gap. Many police captains and chiefs are reporting that one of the biggest problems that they have is the experience gap within their agency. So when you have a lot of people that are retiring, especially the experienced ones, that knowledge transfer doesn't happen as effectively as it does when you have those people working within the ranks. So that's, crisis problem number one. There's an additional crisis problem that there is actually, it's not on this slide, but over in the next 3 years, nationwide, about 18% of all agencies, the law enforcement officers that are working there are eligible for retirement. I mean, almost 20% of your staff is in the next 3 years going to be eligible to retire. Now, are they going to retire? They may not. They may want to keep working. Obviously, that would be great for the agency, but the eligibility alone does put an agency at risk of being understaffed. Another thing, this is something that a lot of folks don't really talk about, but smaller generations. People are having less kids. And they started having less kids about 20 years ago. And those are exactly the people that agencies are trying to recruit and hire. So what this graphic shows, this animation shows, is that back in 1960, you want an upside down funnel if you want a healthy, growing society. That means that there are younger people or more people at the younger ages. Then, but what we're seeing is we're starting to develop into what's considered, it's called a chimney. And when you have a chimney, that means you have more people that are older in the society and less people that are younger that are there in their earning years and then also supporting the older generations. Eventually, and we've seen this in other countries, South Korea, Japan, some of the Asian countries are starting to see this, is that a funnel starts to develop. And that's a real problem. That's population decline. It enlists a whole list of additional problems. But what that means is there's just far more an aging society, basically, and a lot less people filling the job ranks and other roles within that society. So this is a problem. This is something that our replacement rate is 2.2. And currently, we are running at about 1.6 to 1.7. So that means we need 2.2 children created every single year on average in America to replace the people that are currently no longer either active within the society or deceased. And right now, we're at 1.6 to 1.7. So we're too low. Another piece to this is the negative impression. So, police chiefs identifying negative public perception as a significant barrier to recruitment. I think we all know this. This really came to a head during COVID in particular, but some of the negative press and some of the negative impressions had a effect of the amount of applications that were coming through the door. So, what that looks like is, and I'll go into this a little in a second, but the labor bucket. So staffing level, attrition, recruitment, and limited applicants. And this is kind of what it looks like. So an ideal state, perfect equilibrium, correct number of staff. We have minor overtime, minor retirements. This is, a stable state for an agency. The next piece is a natural attrition. So you have retirements, you have transfers, possibly you have budget cuts, which does come up. You have less budget to fund additional roles within the organization, within the agency. These are things are usually overcomable with some recruitment efforts. So increased recruiting. You have outreach, you have website branding upgrades, you have marketing. You start maybe possibly you start using incentives like signing bonuses and other things that are trying to attract additional people. Now, that's going to work to a point. Yes, you're going to be attracting people, and that's great. But what also is happening is the holes are getting bigger at the bottom of the bucket. So what that means is more people are dropping out of your recruiting process. So upwards of 70%, and we'll go into the numbers, but up to 70% are dropping out before before this first stage. Many times the first stage is testing, so PAT or a written test, and their show up rates are very, very low. Some of that is in due to reputation. Some of that is possibly they get a job offer quicker somewhere else. But there's a real problem with that. So there's less people coming through the door, there's less applications, and there's bigger holes at the bottom of the bucket where people are pouring out. And what we're talking about today is more about the holes, not so much the people coming through the door. So a couple of things I wanted to speak to was limited application, poor offer rates, so meaning that less people are getting offers to become law enforcement officers, higher retirement, short staffing, just the overall short staffing within the agency can put out a bad reputation that we don't want to join something that is understaffed and I'm not going to feel supported. Mandatory overtime has an effect. There's a big work-life balance focus for the younger generation. And then changing standards is what kind of standards within the testing process, what's happening there? What kind of people are we bringing in? A lot of different agencies right now are actually reducing educational standards. And that could have a big impact on the type of people that are coming in through the door. Doesn't mean that educational standards are absolutely necessary to find good applicants, but it is going to change the demographic of the people that are applying for the job. So today, our focus is fixing the bucket. Yes, we can focus on increasing water going in the bucket. That's a whole nother thing. That's advertising and marketing and branding and messaging and so many other things. But where we find, and all that is very important, but where we find the biggest bang for the buck is actually closing the holes, maintaining as much water in the bucket as possible so that you can have full agencies and full class sizes. So, three, recruiting and hiring problems. So here is some, actually, this is your side, Jillian. I got to pass it off to you.
Thank you. So this slide is going to show us a couple of statistics. I want to make sure these statistics are showing us women that are applying to be in Academy and women that are actually getting made the offer. It is not about those that are dropping out after already being sworn in. So we're not talking about women failing out of the police academy. We're talking about women dropping out before they ever get there during the recruitment and hiring pipeline. So women express interest in policing and they do apply at meaningful rates. The data consistently shows that. But where we are losing them is between the application and the appointment during all the testing, physical fitness, background investigations, medical reviews, and then more importantly, the long waiting periods in between each part of the process with little to no communication. So as a retired police officer, I want to be clear, this drop-off is not about ability. Women are not being disqualified at disproportionate rates. Instead, they're opting out. And that distinction does matter because it tells us the problem is not always standards, it's the experience of the process. So recruitment pipelines, they're long and sadly, they're often silent. So months can pass in between steps, schedules change, testing dates move, background investigations are delayed or stalled, and applicants are left trying to hold together their lives and hopefully have a job while waiting for an agency that may or may never call them. And for women, that uncertainty does carry real costs, financial pressure, child coordination, fitness maintenance without clear timelines, and competing job offers that provide stability now, maybe not later. So at some point, continuing in the process does become unsustainable for some women. So what this slide really does show us is not a lack of interest in policing amongst women. It shows us where the system itself, they're quietly filtering women out before they ever reach the academy door. So this slide, it gets to the heart of the issue. Women, like I said, are not leaving policing because they don't, or leaving the hiring process of policing because they don't want to serve. They're leaving because the recruitment process itself, it sends early warning signs that the agency may not be prepared to support them. So first, time works against women in the recruitment phase in very concrete ways. Lengthy hiring processes often stretch 6 months to a year. I know when I was sworn in, from my initial applying, I didn't hear back after my civil servants exam for like 6 months. And then from there, it took another 8 months to get sworn in. So it could take forever. And I was deciding whether I was going to stay in the job I was in or have my fingers crossed to hope to get sworn in with the NYPD. But for some people, that's seriously a concern and it creates cascading challenges. So, coordinating caregiving responsibilities, managing income gaps, maintaining physical readiness without knowing when physical agilities testing will actually occur. Every delay does increase pressure. Second, silence during recruitment is not neutral, especially in a male dominated profession. We do know that women are currently represented 13% of all sworn law enforcement. So it is still a male dominated field. So when communication drops off, women don't necessarily interpret that as standard procedure. They instead interpret it as an uncertainty about whether they belong, whether they're valued, or whether that agency has its act together. So again, as a retired cop, I can tell you that policing demands confidence in the systems you want to be a part of. So when the hiring process feels siloed, disorganized, dismissive, applicants reasonably question what the organization will be like once they actually get through the door. Third, what replaces rejection in this system is voluntary withdrawal. Women are not waiting to be told no. Instead, they're quietly exiting when the process communicates intentionally or unintentionally that continuing requires absorbing too much uncertainty with too little support. And lastly, it's not about lowering standards or changing standards. It is not about special treatment. It's about process design. So clear timelines, frequent communication, transparent expectations, and predictable next steps. They're not concessions. They're actually professional signals that an organization or an agency is serious, competent, and prepared.
Great. Thank you. The next thing I'll speak to a little bit is some of the demographic changes that we're dealing with. One is the anxiety problem. So I have young children, and their language is much different than mine growing up. They talk about anxiety openly. They talk about a lot of other things, but there's actually a lot of research that has been done on this. There's a book that came out by Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation. If you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to do so because it does give you a glimpse of what is going on generationally. A lot of it comes down to what we've been seeing is that phones have a gigantic impact on how people perceive the world and obviously increase anxiety potentially. So what we're seeing is that people between the ages of 18 to 25, they've seen a 139% increase in anxiety since 2010. Um, Ages 26 to 34, 103. 35 to 49, 52% increase in anxiety. And for those that are 50 plus, you've actually seen a decrease in anxiety. So great job for you guys, but a lot of the people that you are recruiting are more anxious. This is a very difficult job. It requires calm under pressure. It requires you to be a de-escalator in many regards, and it's really hard to do that when we have an anxious generation literally coming into applying for these jobs. And furthermore, when you're going through training and when you're going through the academy, the anxiety, the heightened anxiety can really drop people out. And so, any way that you can to start understanding how to speak to this generation and then obviously give them the tools necessary to deal with anxiety through the entire process and ultimately being a law enforcement officer is going to benefit the agency as a whole. Another piece to this is channel overload and frequency problem. So this is something that I know most of our clients feel extremely overwhelmed with. And this is the generational differences between how people communicate. As you can see, I have two more generations to add here, but I want to speak to these for a second. So one is Generation G is that's greatest generation. Influential tech is TV. Preferred communication is face to face. Feedback frequency is scheduled, and stereotypes hardworking and responsible. Now that goes top to bottom, and then we go left to right, and left to right being boomers, Gen X, and Zennials. Now, each one of these generations are usually divided by first birth rates is one factor, but the other one is some sort of significant technology that was developed during that generation and how that's divided. But as you can see, and I'll point to this, is that we go from scheduled to feedback frequency to be on demand, meaning that is something that they would like to get as quickly as possible, but understanding that emails take a while and all that kind of stuff. But then also we have a increase of influential text. So we have Facebook and YouTube, email and text, preferred communications. So that's just the easy part. Zennials, it gets fairly easy. Then it gets hard. This is where it gets difficult is the proliferation of technology in particular. So Gen Y and Gen Z, we've gone from TV being an influence to Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, and then even AI, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I mean, it is a bombardment of influential technology and messaging that is hitting these individuals. Preferred communication, this is another thing that strains agencies in a pretty big way, is how do we communicate? How do we break through that communicative immunity that is happening within agencies or within the general public? Because they have FaceTime, they have social, they have text, they have messaging apps like WhatsApp and other Signal and other messaging apps that are out there. So how do you actually message with individuals? Now, I will say, if you're trying to do these one-on-one, if you're just trying to do it manually, there is no way that you'll be able to keep up. Not a chance. But if you do pick a couple that do break through that communicative immunity, meaning you can automate email and you can automate SMS texting, then you can usually break through that barrier. You're never going to be doing FaceTimes on a regular basis. You're never going to be doing messaging apps on a regular basis or social because a lot of times that's their safe space. They don't really want to communicate with a recruiter. They don't want to talk about, they don't want to communicate with their occupation or potential occupation through those apps. But text and email is fair game. The last two pieces to this is a real big problem, and that is feedback frequency, continuous and instant. They want to get instant feedback. And I honestly blame Amazon for this in many regards, is that you place that order on Amazon and you get an immediate response stating that you place that order. That is the positive affirmation that creates that little dopamine hit, if you will. That instant expectation for feedback is very difficult for agencies to keep up on, especially with recruiting. Your applicants, they want to get instant feedback. They want to know instantly when they send a message that they get something back. And so that's very difficult to do if you don't have a good system. And the last one is, yeah, these are kind of funny. The stereotypes, they're generalized and but no loyalty and cynical. I'll speak to the cynical piece. There's a lot of information out there that has them question what is and what isn't. That makes them inherently a little bit more cynical than other generations. And then the other piece to this is the no loyalty. No loyalty, there's been a lot of job hopping. And with the open forums that are online telling them that you can leave your job and make more money, a lot of them hear that and they do it. So the loyalty piece to this is that they move from agency to agency or job to job at a much higher frequency than boomers or even Gen X. So keeping this in mind, crafting messages, building systems, and automating things as much as possible is the only way to win. So that's when we kind of get to solutions. So one, I want to speak to this. So where do applicants drop off? So 32% drop off in background investigations. That's just naturally probably going to happen. Now, some agencies we work with, they've done a really great job of speeding things up when it comes to background investigation, and that has helped them have more hires within that agency. But the next piece is physical fitness and written testing. Now, everybody's stages are a little bit different. We've tried to normalize the different stages as much as possible, but typically within an agency, there is an initial testing or initial survey or something that is a bit of a self-selection type of device that gets the best recruits to move on to the next stage. Well, a lot of our agencies, before we start working with them, they are not sending out testing materials. They're not saying that they need to be fit. So that a lot of these really good candidates, these are really good applicants, they're just showing up not prepared. And if they were a little bit more prepared, they could influence that 43% pass fail rate for these initial testings. Where we can make the biggest impact is actually the initial no testing, no show rates. So across the nation, nationwide, we're about 50 to 70% no show. That means only 30% of applicants are actually showing up. Now, are some of those applicants not very good? Yes, there are people that will have felonies in their background or they will have something that is an immediate disqualifier. That's fine. But what I'm going to speak to next is how do we capture just a small percentage of those dropouts, those people that could potentially be fantastic officers within your agency, and make sure that they're carried through all the way through the background investigation and ultimately graduate in the academy, because it will make a enormous impact on how you fill your agency. So, number one, problem, low testing show up. So 50 to 70% applicant drop off. 53% of those that drop out, they indicate it's because of lack of communication. This was a survey that was done by Harvard and Chicago Office of Inspector General back in 2021. Perf relates to a different statistic, but that mostly speaks to the less they're communicated with, the less they stay within the system. The other side of this is 61% feel ghosted. Now, these are people that responded as well, stated that had gone through completely at the very end of becoming a law enforcement officer, but they still felt that they were ghosted through the process. So the concept of ghosting somebody, meaning they sent a message and they got nothing back, or it's just a complete silence. They don't know where they are within the process. So solution. So high frequency messaging. The standard is 3 to 5 messages per week leading to testing. Okay. That may seem like a lot, but it truly isn't. And it needs to be a combination of SMS and email. So 3 to 5 messages, most people receive upwards of 100 to 150 messages every single day, whether that's notifications from applications or that's SMS texting or emails. 3 to 5 per week just breaks through the clutter a little bit more than what's currently occurring. And then something to always consider is the rule of seven. So the rule of seven is somebody has to hear something 7 times before they hear it once. Now, the person that is putting together the outbound messaging, they've heard this probably 300 times by now. So sometimes they forget the rule of seven. But this messaging is brand new to a lot of these applicants. And so they have to hear this message over and over and over again. Does it have to be a carbon copy? No, it does not have to be a carbon copy. They would probably dismiss that pretty quickly. But it has to be the same message said in a different way 7 times before they hear it one time. Your best applicants will read it and capture it and know it and move on. But a lot of your applicants will not remember the initial messaging that you're sent out. So what does it look like? So let's say we influence um, our um, our show up rates. So we have calculators on our website that will help you do this. We have about 6 different calculators that are up there right now. But this one in particular is very simple. So what we're speaking to, and I know the font is really small, so we made it bigger. So what this looks like is, let's say we have 2,000 applications on an annual basis, and our current show up rate is 30%. So with that, we're about 4.4% conversion ratio if all other conversion ratios are kept constant. Okay. Um, if with that, uh, if we influence this from 30 to 40%, at the end of the day, at the end of the year, we will have 29 more sworn officers. So we've increased our conversion ratio or our hire ratio from 4.4 to 5.8. Now, what does that mean? That means a 28.6% more new hires just by influencing that first stage. And that's what we're really speaking to here is getting people to show up. The more hooks that we can put in them, the more likely they are to be pulled through the entire process. And what's happening in agency after agency that we work with is they're just not communicating with their applicants. They're not telling them where they need to go, what time they need to be there, what they need to be testing for, or what it looks like to actually work for that agency. I'll try to speed up a little bit. The next problem is low passing rate. So 40 to 50% drop off here. 43% fail because of lack of preparation. Another solution here is prep messaging. So developing simple study guides and distribute them frequently, 7 to 15 times. Rule of 7 applies here as well. Having weekly workouts, really important. Making sure that if you're doing workouts as an agency, that you're inviting your applicants to those workouts. They will feel a sense of bond. They will see the people that they're going to be working with, and that they are more likely to be a sworn officer at your agency. And then pre-tests and quizzes. I'm going to speak to AI really quickly. You can develop pre-tests and quizzes very, very easily by putting some study material into an AI machine and then having it actually develop pre-tests for you. We've shown a lot of our agencies how to do this type of thing, but in general, it's a net benefit to the applicants and the agency to put this type of information out there so that the candidate can be far, far more prepared. What does that look like? And I'll speak to this real quickly. Same thing as before. So instead of 50%, we have gone to 60% pass rate. If we do that, then we get net 17. Of 2,000 applications, we get net 17 new sworn officers, a 5.2% conversion rate. So that means about 20.7% new hires just by influencing these first two stages, in particular, the testing stage of this. Uh, there's two more problems here we're speaking to. One is ambiguity, 22% dropouts because of length, silence, lack of interest, scheduling and conflicts, and unmet expectations. So they're expecting something and it's not met. So solution, process transparency. Build visualizations of the process. You're at this stage, and then you go to this stage, and they take this long, and you're going to be asked these questions. This generation really wants to know everything before doing anything. And so keeping that in mind and making it as visual as possible, again, YouTube generation, they want to see everything laid out visually. Frequent status updates, day in the life messages. They want to see what it's like to work within the agency. Some of our agencies have videos that we distribute that is, this is what it looks like for a ride along. This is what it looks like to be part of SWAT or some other unit within the agency that they want to possibly do. And then reduce time wherever possible. The faster you go, the more effective you're going to be. So every second counts. Average number of average number of email and text messages sent to applications during recruiting process. Currently, this is what we've pulled together, and that is 10.6. So typical application process to Academy invite or job offer or wherever you want to denote it is 4 to 6 months or so. Sometimes they can extend even further than that. But we're taking a 6 month time span, and that's only 10.6 messages that go out. That's less than one message every 2 weeks. That's not enough. The audience needs more. Your applicants need more. So the optimal SMS and email frequency is 4+ per week. So the last one is cost and time. Recruiter investigator strain, cost of recruiting and investigations, and then manual processes. So solutions, I got to speak to what we do a little bit, but applicant tracking system, respond capture, this is what we solve. We automate email and SMS. We centralize communication across the entire agency so everybody can see the different communications that have gone out and where people are responding and dropping off. Recruiting, HR, and background investigation all in the same platform. So they can all see things and they can all communicate. And then clear status and communication. So automated recruitment systems. So like ours, we see a 23 to 30% improvement in job offers. So that's more pull through. That's more people going through the entire process. This is kind of just a snippet, but when we're typically working with our agencies, this is what you see as we start building out frameworks of building communication. So this is just an example. This is one of our clients, but We have 11 different stages here, and in those 11 different stages, we try to put together a certain number of messages at each particular stage, given a certain time span between those different messages. This is 88 plus messages in total, and we start building messages around that. The other thing is recruitment management. Recruitment management is moving people from one stage to the next. Our system is actually, this is just a kind of a video showing some of the elements of it, but it's a drag and drop system. And we also have a batch and move system to where you can check mark everybody, move them into the next pipeline, and then they start receiving messages according to that particular stage. And then messaging. We've sent out about 1 million automated messages in back in I keep forgetting it's 2026, 2025. So with that, we send and almost all of those were automated. So they're just updating individuals within the system of where they are, what they need to do, what they can expect. And it has increased their pull through, it has increased their job offers. Last couple things I'll speak to, and then we'll speak to the effects. But ROI fixing the bucket. So fewer candidates needed to be recruited. We already spoke to the kind of the faucet pouring water into the bucket is getting less and less. Well, with being more effective in the process of getting them to the academy, we need fewer candidates. And we frankly don't have much of a choice here, is that we will be receiving fewer candidates if our demographics are getting less and less. So less marketing dollars needed. Marketing dollars are very expensive dollars, and we want to make sure that agencies are utilizing their budgets accordingly. Retain the best applicants, so less money wasted on background and testing for people that possibly don't are not right for the agency. So better communication will get them more involved. More involvement will allow you to see who that applicant is, and then possibly self-select them out if necessary. Stronger bonds equals more hires equals lower dollars. I'll kind of speak to that a little bit, but pass it over to you here, Jillian.
Thanks, Ryan. So just we're going to quickly go over some of the effects. So as a cop, we all know that one of our primary concerns is feeling safe. And if you don't have backup or you don't have enough agencies, officers working in your agency, you feel like you're not safe. You feel like there might be a risk going to work. What do we say? We want to make sure we sign out at the end of the day or end a tour and go home. So a couple of surveys that we pulled from here. How often do you feel your safety is compromised? Due specifically to understaffing in your department. Almost 50% say always or frequently. That's a petrifying number to think of. We have 22% say always, 26% frequently, 32 occasionally, 15 rarely, and a little only 2 at never. And I'd love to meet those 2 agencies or the 2% of people that responded to that. But just really important to note that increasing the amount of individuals in your recruitment pipeline to ultimately convert them to academy candidates will ultimately increase your personnel on in your agency. This survey is another one just looking at what specific safety risks have you experienced. Delayed backup is something that I thought was really noteworthy. Now, in larger municipal agencies, we know that a lot of times you're in a 2-man car, so you do have that luxury of having someone with you in your RMP at all times. But as we know, most agencies are out there with solo cars. And if you are waiting on backup for a long time, that is putting both you and the victim and any witnesses or bystanders on scene at great risk for harm. Additionally, longer response times, which I'll talk to in another couple of slides. We've seen just because of 72% of all law enforcement agencies nationwide reporting some sort of staffing issue, we are seeing longer response times across the country, and something that impacts significantly is case clearance rates, which I'll talk to on the next slide. So I've been doing a lot of work in the professional space on examining what causes, reduced case clearance rates. I have not yet been an agency that is out there boasting about what they're currently doing. We're seeing about nationally 44% of all violent crime is getting cleared, and which means to most of us that 56% of the bad guys are still running around on the streets. That is not because we don't have dedicated investigators. We don't have officers that are out there every day, day in and day out, working their butts off to make sure that they can solve these crimes. The problem is we don't have enough of them. We don't have enough officers on patrol. We are, in some agencies, we're backfilling patrol with detective investigators because we don't have enough people to answer 911 calls. So all of that is going to have a negative influence on your case clearance rates. We've seen them drop dramatically over the past 60 years, but what we're looking at today is, again, over 50% of all violent crimes are unsolved, and property crimes, actually, we're looking at between a 16% and 20% case clearance rate, which means almost 80% of property crimes reported to police are not able to get solved because we're triaging cases as they come in, and the more severe ones are getting the limited personnel and resources that we have. So in order to increase our case clearance rates, which would ultimately increase the way the public perceives us and their willingness and cooperation to work with us and report crimes, we need to be staffing these agencies. As I spoke to on the last slide, there's a lot of relationship between our ability to clear cases as law enforcement and the trust of the public. And more importantly, this survey is actually pretty recent. 62% of Americans believe that crime is a bigger problem today than it was only a few years ago. Now, I know statistically speaking, we have seen declines in certain crime categories over these last 2 years, but the way in which the community we work in perceives crime is more important at this stage of the game. 73% of individuals surveyed say crime is impacting the way they live their daily lives, but 86% of those surveyed are actually adjusting their daily routines because they feel unsafe. One of the reasons that they feel unsafe is because they don't see enough cops and they don't see enough crimes getting solved. This is just speaking to response times, as I said earlier. Major cities, New Orleans, New York City, I know Chicago, Los Angeles, major metropolitan areas that do have a lot more media presence and a lot more people scrutinizing what they're doing every day have been discussing the increases in response times, but that's not isolated solely to major metro areas. We are seeing, and most people don't discuss it, but in your smaller rural departments, you already have an increased response time just due to how far things are from each other. So you often have one-man cars that are covering large miles of jurisdiction, and they may already have on average over a 25-minute response time. But if you don't have enough officers or deputies out on the street or out on patrol, you are going to see that increase gradually, which ultimately hurts us in getting there fast enough to take the proper victim statement, take the witness statement, be able to seize any digital or forensic evidence on scene. So all of these things together, just having not enough officers on patrol or getting into the academy, going through training and getting on the job, this has long-term consequences for all other elements of policing.
And I'll just speak to this real quickly. It's expensive. It is prohibitively expensive when we start talking about overtime expenses, and then just the overall recruiting process can get very expensive when it's ineffective. And so this is a redundant slide, yes, and I do know that sometimes officers do want overtime, but it's the mandatory overtime. It's the understaffing overtime that we're mostly speaking to here. The stuff that agencies can't really account for effectively. I'm going to speak to this real quickly, and we've got enough time for Q&A. But our commitment, 30 by 30's commitment and Respond Capture's commitment is intertwined here. Is that we are trying to fill agencies with the best candidates. We are trying to make sure that those that are the best candidates make it all the way through the process because it's a competitive atmosphere out there right now. Not just competitive with agency to agency, it's competitive from individual, from agency to private sector or other areas because it's not just law enforcement that's seeing the lack of applicants, it's a lot of other industries as well. And making that job, making that career look very appealing, but also reinforce that with a great process, a great experience, is going to retain the people within that process as much as possible. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to make sure that agencies succeed at these efforts because they are harder than ever, and that we are also automating and building processes that make it streamlined so that agencies don't bear the burden of sending out mass emails without automation and other things associated with it. We want to make sure that the agencies are being as effective as possible. What do we do? This is where we get to boast a little bit, but we do a lot of things. But we do create the messages. We customize the platform for our agencies. We automate the messages. We train your agency so that recruiting officers and background investigators and HR, they all can work on this, and we train them how to do it. We respond to applicant questions. There's agencies that we work with where they want us responding, and sometimes it's as simple as here's the place you need to be for testing. This is the type of materials you need to be testing for, and this is how physically fit you need to be. A lot of the questions, we know that a lot of recruiters get these questions, but they're the same questions over and over and over and over again. And it's our job is try to reduce as much strain for the recruiters as possible so that they can be there when they need to pick up the phone and call somebody that is possibly thinking about a different agency or a different occupation. We want the recruiters to be focused more on the one-on-one and less on the let's answer the same question over and over again, because we don't think that's an effective use of their time. We report success. So our platform can report and measure everything. And so we can know exactly where people come from as far as advertising goes, all the way until they become a sworn officer. So we can directly correlate the effort to the outcome. We alert problems. So sometimes there are problems. People are flagging saying they can't make a testing site or whatever it is. We alert those problems to the recruiters for outreach. And then we fill agencies. That's a big piece to this is we want to make sure that the agencies are fully staffed for that they can serve their community and it reduces the amount of strain across the entire agency. We also do this, but that's just the last piece. All right. For 30 by 30 members, we've got a 30% discount on our software. Just want to mention that. We do see this partnership as something that is highly beneficial to the members, and we want to make sure that they receive that. And then we also we offer a free agency analysis and demo. So what we do is just from a conversation, we see where there's potential operational gaps or things that could improve. Whether we do it for you or not, we just want to help. And we can give some outside perspective of what we've seen that works and hopefully guide you in a positive direction. That's it. So we appreciate your time. We know that there's been a lot of talking, a lot of data, a lot of slides. I'll even get off of video for you all so you know I'm still there you go.
Right.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, this is incredibly thoughtful and helpful. And, my first question that I know someone is going to ask is, how do they get in touch with you? And I think, is it that contact at Respond Capture if they'd like to see a demo or anything? Is that the best path?
Yeah, that's the best path is to reach out to. We'll respond and we'll set up a time to discuss.
Got it. And, just for me, a couple of the things that really stood out when we have this conversation is thinking about that number at scale. So we all know that there's staffing challenges in the US. They don't apply to all agencies, but they do apply to many. But when you aggregate that number up to think about the number of police officers that we would need in the United States and dispatchers, because they're incredibly important as well. Really glad you included them. It's really remarkable when you think about that, and that is going beyond any questions about whether that staffing number is appropriate to begin with, right?
Correct.
So that's part of it, and I really like how you frame the generation piece in terms of their attention span. And I haven't thought about this in terms of anxiety. That is a really critical piece that I think has been missing from some of the discussions. And Jillian, just how you outlined the issues that are specific to women, that's something I'm going to take and continue to push out. While we're waiting to see if anyone else has a question, I have one quick question, Ryan. When you talk about the automated updates, like what triggers those? How does that work on the tech side?
So typically it's triggered when they go into a new stage. So when they move from, let's say they move from the initial testing to background investigation or psych evaluation or something. It doesn't really matter. We have one agency that has almost 90 different stages, which is kind of incredible. Largely, it's mostly to denote why they dropped out or different components to their application process. But at every single stage, they start into a new outbound email and text stream. So they get a new email saying you are now at this pipeline stage. They get a text message that reinforces that email because most people don't check their email when they're this generation. But that text message is check your email. There's detailed instructions that you need to read. Let us know if you have any questions. And then they are going to be receiving emails every 2 to 3 days beyond that. It can be triggered by activity. So if they ask a question, they can receive a automated response. And then if it needs something that is far more customized, then it is forwarded on to the recruiter, and that recruiter can respond in kind. Sometimes they're more personal questions that the recruiter needs to respond directly. That's typically how that happens.
And Ryan, I'm not sure that you can respond to this question directly, but there is a question about what agencies that you work with. Can you say a little bit, at least at a high level, about what states or anything about
We're in
you work?
almost every state. And there's one in particular about California. We actually operate in California as well. There isn't a state, a municipality, or a county that we're not able to work in. It's more of just a matter of discussing what that agency is currently doing and seeing how we integrate.
Okay. And I think you mentioned at a high level about some of the success you've had so far with some of your law enforcement agencies in particular. One thing, I don't want to go into the tech too deep, but just to let some folks know on the phone, this is a solution that is relatively inexpensive and can sit on top of your existing technology. So if nothing else, I think it's worth a discussion with Respond Capture. And to be clear, 30 by 30 doesn't really endorse companies in a traditional sense. So that's Tanya speaking and not necessarily 30 by 30. Jillian, one of the questions is related to diversity and how this impacts. I know that in one of our meetings, we had a discussion about how applying and how the applicant process, recruiting and hiring might be different for women and people of color. Are you and Ryan able to speak to that a bit?
I'll speak to it slightly if Ryan wants to add anything. And he and I have spoken for months about this. One of the wonderful things about Respond Capture is because we're going to have applicant information in there, gender, ethnicity, all that stuff, where they live, we will be able to then extrapolate where people are falling out at certain phases. So if it is noted that a certain ethnicity or residents of a certain area, a certain demographical area within a larger jurisdiction are dropping out at higher rates for the educational portion or the physical fitness portion, we can actually flag that for the agency. So it's also serving as a data collection tool. Now, I might be speaking out of turn here, but Respond Capture wouldn't come in until the agency had to fix it, but we would alert them to the problem so that they could come up with a solution that works for them.
Yeah, we have a very simple credo. What gets measured gets managed, and we try to measure and understand as much data as we possibly can, because that's the basis for improvement if you're trying to improve those statistics in some way. And so, to your point of different demographics and trying to capture that data, we try to understand it, pass that information on, and then come up with a game plan. Whether that is changing the type of marketing to attract different applicants, or it is taking special care of understanding who that person is all the way through the application process. Either way, it's probably both, but either way, it does require understanding and then strategy and execution.
That's helpful. And thinking about it from a 30 by 30 perspective, one of the things that we encourage agencies to do is to identify, to the extent possible, where people are dropping off, to Jillian's point. And I think this is a very helpful tool. Having worked at the NYPD in this space for many years, one of the things that was challenging for us was the way the system was built. It was difficult to do that with any degree of certainty, to see where people dropped off at each juncture. And so I think that, to me, and the idea of people really being able to map out their process and the importance of that is one of the main things that attracts me to this, and also that I think is different about some of the other products that are out there right now, because I don't think a lot of entities can very clearly tell you where you're missing the mark. And I know we're running close to time, but Ryan, one last question for you to comment on. I get concerned sometimes with the constant reminders, and I think a colleague of mine, a friend, was concerned that they didn't want to be viewed as like stalking their candidates, or overwhelm. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I heard you saying is that the research indicates with this generation that they actually want and need that in a different way.
Yeah, the amount of notifications and messages that they get from other sources really creates a lot of noise, and they're expecting it. They've turned on these notifications. They're expecting these types of things. And if you're not there at all, then they're going to think they consider abandonment. We've been abandoned in some way by this process. And so what they are asking for is actually more communication. I need to know. Even we still get questions with all the high frequency stuff that we send out for our agencies. We still get people that say, when is my testing date again? And that's indicative of this generation is that they skim, don't read, and they don't document. So they don't take something and say, I'm going to make a calendar invite from this. They need a lot of, I don't want to use the word handholding because I know that is a big kind of not a very good term for this. It's more a matter of understanding that the environment that they're in is very noisy and you got to break through the noise. And that's what this high communication is doing, is breaking through the noise.
All right. It's 4 o'clock, so time to wrap up for those of you that joined a little bit late. This is our 30 by 30 first webinar of the year. Super excited to have Jillian Snyder and Ryan Lewis join us to talk about recruitment and hiring practices and in the work they're doing with Respond Capture. If you had a question that you think of later, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Respond Capture. We are more than happy to send that to you. The other thing I'll say, if you signed up for this webinar via email in the next week or two, we have another product that Ryan, Jillian, and I have been talking about that's connected to this. So we'll share some information with you on that as part of a follow-up to discussion. So thank you all for being here today. As a reminder, again, it'll be up on our website in about a week. And Jillian, Ryan, I really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to meet with us and in all of our agencies in our network.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it,
Tom.
and thank you so much for having us.
Thanks all.